All right, hello everybody, and just wanted to share a quick video with everyone regarding a new software spreadsheet that we're going to be using to have people come into our orientation process for our system. In the past, we have used paper forms for anybody that was newly hired on with our agency, and there was specific preceptor forms. There was a driving checkoff for driving mileage. There was multiple different pieces of paper that everybody had to go in and sign. In the past, we've heard people ask about, is there a way that we can get information that is shared with all the preceptors and have a better understanding of where somebody is at in the orientation process? So what we have done is taken a field training and evaluation program daily observation report and have merged this in to a new way of documenting new providers that come into the system that is orienting into our agency. I want to go over how this form works and the important information you need to know and how to operate this form. Now, right now, we're going to have some people coming into the system and they're going to be riding with several different FTOs. What we have tried to work out is to make sure that we've got a consistent FTO with each individual. So every shift A, B, C, and D, we have selected one FTO, one preceptor to ride with each of these individuals. Now, the question that is brought up is if we have an EMT and we have an EMT preceptor and a paramedic preceptor, who is going to be responsible for filling out this report? And the answer to that is a team effort. So if you've got your EMT preceptor and you have your EMT orientee that is riding with you, the EMT can very well fill out the information in the form just as much as the paramedic preceptor can. So that's going to have to be a discussion between both of the providers on the ambulance as to who's going to be responsible for filling out this information. Now, the great thing about this form is that it is very objective, which means in this form there are specific criteria of what the standard is that we're looking for individuals that are coming into this system. So let me give you a brief overview of how this works, and I'm going to place this on manager for each individual to be able to access and take a look at and review. Now, as everyone is being assigned a preceptee, a new employee with our agency, this will be shared via Google Drive. So everything will be accessed in Google Sheets and you'll be able to access it through your drive in Google Drive. Every preceptor will have editing access along with the supervisor and the battalion chief on this shift. The orientee, the individual that is in the training and evaluation program, will have viewing rights only. The reason why we do viewing rights only is to maintain the integrity of the form. Now, that's not saying that we're concerned about somebody going in here and changing some numbers around and editing some things. This is just saying that if we present this in a true evaluation program showing that this is what was reviewed and evaluated by the preceptor, there's no question about whether or not this is accurate information written from the preceptor. And of course, there's track changes and everything that you can view on the form itself. All right. So setting up the form is fairly simple. This is something that I will manage on my end before sharing this. You've got your employee name here. We'll just come up with a generic name. Benny Smith is the employee name. the FTO name. Now there's going to be multiple FTOs, but for now we're just going to keep it simple. They're riding with me today. Shift, let's see, A shift, EMS 91. Chief Travis Scott and Captain Hickman. Hired date, let's say they just got hired. Today was their very first day. So what we'll do is double click. They got hired today. Trainee credential there, and EMT. So Mr. Benny Smith here is an EMT. Now what this does right here will duplicate everything into each individual shift. Now on this page we have an instructional page. I'm not going to go over every single thing in detail. This is just kind of a quick overview of how the program works and information that you need to know about as far as entering information in. So let's go straight to the shift. Alright, so shift 1, you see that your daily observation report 1, the employee name is Benny Smith, FTO is me, and then the station unit assignment is going to be A shift on 91. Let's see, the first shift is tomorrow, so 11/30/2021. And we'll go from there. So automatically populates Tuesday, November 30th. Let's make this tomorrow, 12/1/2021. Wednesday, December 1st. All right. Now, just to go from top to bottom to make sure that we've reviewed everything, one of the things that you'll notice is when you see each of these columns, you can hover over these and FTEP employee not at work. If your FTEP employee is not at work on this date, please select ENW, which stands for Employee Not at Work, in the drop-down menu. So let's say Benny Smith calls out sick or has an emergency and is not there, employee not at work. Lost training day due to no FTO available. Let's say something happened and I called out or had an emergency and wasn't available. You hover over here, you'll see if there's no FTO available for the shift resulting in a lost training day for the FTEP employee, please indicate by selecting LTD in the drop-down menu. So I'll come here and hit LTD if the FTO is not available. All right, rating instructions. It kind of goes everything, reviews everything here on a 5-point grading scale. 1 being unacceptable, 5 being superior, and 3 being acceptable, which is the standard. Now, we do have NO, which means not observed, and we have NRT, which means not responsive to training. And I'll go through each one of those two later on. But let's talk about everything that we've got here. So in the beginning, you've got appearance, preparedness, and condition. Next, you have safety assessment documentation. Next is attitude, relationships, demeanor. Next, you'll see knowledge application. Then skills, performance, and ability. Under each one of those, you'll see comments. At the very bottom, you have FTO shift comments, notes, and lesson plans, and employee trainee comments. I'll go into more detail with those later on. So this is the entire sheet of everything that we're looking at for grading. So appearance, preparedness, and condition. Punctuality, shift change procedures. You hover over this and what you see is the definition of punctuality, shift change procedures. It evaluates the new employee's punctuality and reporting for duty, evaluates the new employee's conformance to departmental policy in regards to uniform and PPE when reporting for duty, evaluates the employee's conformance to departmental policy in regards to shift change procedure, example, controlled substance changeover unit report. Basically what this is the person is on time and you follow proper shift change procedure. Now when you're looking at grading this, first thing you should always do is start with what is the standard. So you're determining how do you grade them. Are they a 1? Are they a 5? Or are they something in between? First, always hover over your 3. So 3 is what is acceptable. So, arrives at work at the assigned time, reports to work in proper uniform, ready for duty, and follows proper procedures for shift. If they meet all these, then it's acceptable. That is a 3. Let's say maybe they meet all this plus something. So you want to know what is that 5? What is the superior? You hover over the 5, you see arrives at work at least 30 minutes prior to shift change, volunteers to stay past assigned shift time to help in the event of a shift vacancy per departmental policy, ensures offgoing and oncoming relief adheres to proper shift change procedure without exception. So they show up to work early, they handle all their business as far as swapping communication equipment over, and everything is handled appropriately. Now the question is, well, they're not a 3, they're definitely not a 5, but they're somewhere in between. So how do you grade that? Well, let's say they arrive 30 minutes early, they reported to work in proper uniform ready, they followed proper shift change procedure. Maybe there was a shift that was open and available the next day, but something was there, they weren't able to stay over, and they didn't want to volunteer to do it, so that's a 4. If it's, one or two things above the standard, but not quite everything in the 5, that's a 4. And, that'll also play a role for the 1 and the 3 as well. So let's say they don't meet the standard. They didn't meet acceptable. What is the definition of unacceptable? So you'll hover over this, and it tells you unacceptable. Fails to report for duty at a scheduled time. They showed up 10 minutes late. Fails to arrive at work in uniform, ready for duty. Everything was in disarray. They did not have their uniform ready. Maybe it was all wrinkled up, or they had to throw something in the wash machine and wash it real quick and dry it, or they pulled it out of the wash machine this morning, had to come to work and throw it in the dryer. Fails to follow proper procedure for shift change. They show up, they don't even communicate, they just sign, and then they take the keys and go over. Now, one, that's a failure for the offgoing or ongoing crew to not communicate effectively with, the individual of the crew for that day. So that's kind of a two-way street. But if they do not engage in shift change whatsoever, then that fails to follow proper procedure. Now, as you go through each one of these, what you'll see is general appearance, physical skill, radio usage. All of these have the definition of what they mean. All you've got to do is hover over it. Every single one of these also tells you what is the acceptable standard. Now, grading from a 1 to 3, same thing. Let's say they were late, 10 minutes late, but they meet everything else in a 3, well then that's a 2. So let's take a look at this, and I'm just going to start grading some random stuff just for y'all to get a good look at it. I have an understanding of what happens from here. And this is just selecting some random numbers. No pattern or anything of that is readily identified. All right, and down here you've got your comments. So your comments don't have to be extremely detailed, but then again, they don't have to be extremely brief. If somebody is 3s across the board and they're acceptable, you can just simply put in the comments, meets the acceptable standard. If somebody scores below the standard or above the standard, what we're looking for is justification and a reasoning why. So we know if it's a solid 1, you can put in there, let's say for shift change, they had a 1. You simply type in the comments, arrived at work 10 minutes early, uniform wasn't dried, they had to dry it before they could put it on, and they did not engage in shift change. If they got their 5 in physical skill, you go in there and you explain in detail why their physical skill was a 5. 3s are just simple, met the standard. Provider safety documentation. Once again, every one of these has a definition of each. I encourage every one of you to read the definition so it tells you exactly what it is, and then read the standard. Remember, when you're grading somebody, you always start with the standard and you question, do they meet the standard? If the answer is no, is it above the standard or is it below the standard? And grade accordingly. So we're going to come in here and just start selecting some numbers. And 5 and 5. Once again, comments in here for the reason why they were either above or below the standard. If they met the standard, simply just type meets the standard. Attitude and relationship, once again, you've got definition for every one, and you've got what is the acceptable standard for each of those. And we're just going to put in some random numbers. And then you type your comments in there. Same thing all the way down, select, and go from there. Now, if you've got an EMT partner, we know that you may not be able to perform any intramuscular skills, like you may not run a call where they would have to administer epi for an allergic reaction. Let's see, electrical therapy. We know that an EMT might not have the opportunity to work an AED just because there may not be an AED present and the paramedic will always be using a monitor. If it's something that you don't see that day, you simply select not observed. Now, not responsive to training. This is going to be very specific to an individual that, let's say, has been receiving a 1 on, let's say, advanced airway management. They've got a 1 for 3 shifts in a row. In the comments, it's been identified. In the lesson plan, there's been objectives to cover for each shift, the next shift, and nothing is being done. There's been a change in either the way instruction's been given. There's been a different way to teach something, whether it's hands-on, whether it's reading some material, whether it's coaching, and let's just say there's a block and they're not responding to the training that you're being provided. And after several shifts of not progressing, that's when you're not responsive to training would come in, and you just simply select the 7 and it'll populate elsewhere. So your FTO shift comments, you've got your individual comments here, and this is where you just kind of piece the puzzle together and you make comments on the overall shift of how things went. You can put, specific notes in there throughout the day, and of course you can create a lesson plan. Let's say we did poor on CPAP because we're not responsive to training. In there, you can type in, please review CPAP skill and protocols pertaining to same. Next shift, we will run a scenario that requires a patient that will need to be placed on CPAP with an inline neb. Of course, you got your lesson plan laid out. It's very obvious on what you've planned out and what you're going to do your next shift. So all of that information will be there. Next is employee trainee comments. This is the opportunity for the orientee, the trainee, to come in and put in any comments they want to. Now, they can type in there that whether they agree or they disagree with something, or whether it's they take ownership and say, yeah, I messed up on this part, but here's my plan. I'm going to study and prepare myself for the CPAP scenario for next shift, and we're going to be able to jump right in and take care of it. So the employee will have to type this on the computer where the FTO has logged in. So remember, the employee has viewing rights only, which means they will only be able to view this form. They'll have instant access to it 24/7, but they will not be able to alter or change anything. That's where they have to depend on the FTO, the preceptor, to come in here and type these comments. Now, my recommendation is to go ahead and get started on this early to be able to have this documentation taken care of. And it's very quick as far as filling out the numbers. It's just more of being familiar on what the acceptable standard is and what the definitions are for each criteria. Now, when you look at it, the punctuality shift change procedure, that's taken care of first thing that morning, and everything else kind of fills in throughout the day. Now, the question is, if you run 10 calls throughout the day, which call do you use to grade this? Well, what we're looking for is consistency, which means consistent threes or consistent fours or consistent fives throughout the entire process. So, how do you get this consistency? Well, you look at the worst call ran for the day. Let's say there are 3 calls out of those 10 that were completely knocked out of the ballpark. They were ran great, everything was perfect. But the other 7 calls, there were some fumbles, there were some errors that were made. You pick that one call that really sticks out as the worst call, and then that's what you grade it on. Now, the reasoning behind that is you've got those ones that you've knocked out of the park, and you can easily come in here and make comments on call such and such. Everything was done great here, but this one call, this is where we really fumbled at. Now, we all know we all have bad days and stuff happens, but we want consistent, acceptable calls, which means the standard is being met on every single call. Once we get there, we've got somebody that's cleared in the system and they're ready to function in a second person role, or if they're going through a paramedic boarding process, they are cleared to function as an acceptable standard paramedic in our system. So that's why you take that worst call of the day, and that's where you grade it on, and it lets them know that, hey, there was other things that were good, but on this one call, this is where things happen at. Now, this is where you really have to be detailed in your comments. Always comment positive stuff, whatever those positives are. Shout them out, shout them on the top of the mountain. Put them in here for us to review, but you've also got to bring out where those areas are for improvement and discuss ways to improve. Now, each shift, you're going to have a different form. You've got shift 2, simply come in here and type the date. If by chance shift 2, there's a new FTO, they were running with J. Smith, you simply come up there and change the FTO name for that day. Now, the information auto-populates for shift 3, shift 4, based on what is put here on page 1. Now, the great thing about this, each shift is going to be filled out the same, shift 1, 2, 3, 4. When you come down here and scroll all the way to the right, now we've got a total of 21 shifts here, which is a typical 90-day process. You've got this tab for total review. Now, your total review basically puts all of that information, those numerical values for each shift, and plugs it into a chart. So you see all these numbers here that auto-populated straight over from each individual tab. What this allows you to do is this basically creates your foundation of where you're at, and you get to see positive growth in the individual as they go through all 21 shifts or 3 orientation shifts or ever how many shifts that they're being assigned. It's okay to see some 1s and 2s in the beginning, especially maybe it's somebody that is brand new in the EMS and this is their first EMS job ever. So if we see 1s and 2s in the beginning, we know that we've set the foundation. Hopefully what we're looking for is those 1s and 2s that turns into 3s and 4s, and then eventually at the end, it would be great to see all 5s. We strive for 5. But if we go from 1s and 2s and then we hit 3s, we know 3 is the acceptable standard, and we're okay with just solid 3s. Now, once again, we've got our definitions, so we know what the definitions of each one of these are, and we know what the acceptable standard is because it is defined. That is what makes this form very objective. Now, when you've got those 1s and 2s, of course, we want the comments to help us understand what specific parts of that standard they're missing. Now, in here, we've got our call log. Our call log, what we're going to do is each date, we'll double click and add whatever the date is. We'll put our report number in here. As you can see, report number follows in from ESO 2021- whatever the report number is. our status for the ride status for trainee. Right now, this says P2 or P3, which is kind of what we would use for a clearing paramedic. If they're an EMT and it doesn't fit the P2, P3, or A2, A3, just kind of leave that blank for now. This form will eventually be updated to reflect all levels once we really fine-tune this. EMD code has got all of our EMD codes that you can ever think of for whatever the call may be. And your outcome is going to be canceled, no patient refusal, BLS, ALS1, or ALS2. Now, the outcome is over here on the right, and this is defined based off of how each call gets billed for. So, BLS level skill only, these are just the things that you did for your call. If by chance the call was upgraded where IV access was performed and a couple medications were given, then it's an ALS1. If it's a significant call where we've got 2 lines established, maybe we had chest decompression because it was a bad trauma, this is where it bumps up to an ALS level 2. So this gives you the definition of what the outcome is reported. So each call that they attend will be on here. Now, these calls for individuals that are in orientation always document every call, whether they were the lead attending or whether they assisted. That's where you document all that information. If we're using this for an individual that is working through system entry, and it is a call that they are going to use for clearing in the P3 status, that's where you would put this call on there. Now, once they've switched over to P2, that's whenever you can start flip-flopping calls, or if the FDO says, I'm going to be the EMT, if you determine that it's a call that needs to be dropped down to the EMT level, you can hand it off to me and I'll take it. I recommend putting those calls in there as well, simply because we can go back and review those calls and say, yes, that was acceptable for the P2 paramedic to turn it down to an EMT. There's been some situations where the patient may have changed and the paramedic in the back decided that maybe I want to put a IV in here, and maybe it's just an advanced EMT level call, or it may bump up to a paramedic level call. That's stuff that we want to see and review for assessment, a proper assessment. We got the call log down here, and it gives you the total amount of calls logged. Now, if by chance you fill this up because you run a lot of calls, we've got call log 2 that comes in here as well. We've also got our driving log. So in here, what you'll do is, once this individual has taken our driving course and they've gone through the cone course and road course, they're now cleared to drive. You'll come in here and you'll select the date, you'll put the unit in, you'll put the destination, whether it's area familiarization, to the scene, in county hospital, out of county hospital. You got your mode, which is pulled straight from ESO. You'll type in the preceptor name and then your total miles. This is something that we've put in here, which basically says the trainee shall have satisfactorily completed the cone course, have at least 25 miles of driving monitored by a representative of training section staff, and complete at least 100 miles of monitored driving with the FDO prior to release to second person status. At least 40 miles of monitored driving must be logged prior to emergency driving by trainee. Only after logging 65 miles of FTO monitored driving training may the trainee be considered to drive an ambulance to emergent hospital with the patient on board. We want you to get as many miles as possible with this individual. If that means if you've got a slow day, getting out and doing district familiarization, that is absolutely acceptable. The only time that we would say don't do this is if we have a fuel crisis where we have to say keep the apparatus at the station unless you're running calls. Very rare that we have that. Now we've got, you'll see at the bottom, a first 30-day review, second 30-day review, and third 30-day review. This is going to be very specific to a different type of plan that we have. We have this in here in the event that we've got somebody that is still making some twos and not completely meeting the standard, we'll say that this person, of course, needs more time. And what we'll do is we'll ask for a 30-day review to be topped up and just piece all that information you've got for your first shifts for the month and give us a big picture view of where they really haven't met the standard and what the plan is to help them meet the standard for the next uh, 30 days or the next few shifts. Typically, this won't be filled out unless we see the need to further extend our orientation training. So that is just kind of a quick rundown on how to use this form. We're looking at in the future going into some more detailed training with this form to get a better understanding of it. But for right now, I'm going to share this with everybody, and you'll have the opportunity to pull this up in Manager. And I'll send an email out that's going to tell you exactly where it's going to be at. And just pull it up and familiarize yourself with each one of these. Now, you can come out and print this document, and when you print it out, it's nearly 100 pages. But it'll print out a separate form at the end, which will show you all these definitions and what is unacceptable, what is acceptable, and give you the standards. Now, remember, 2s and 4s, they don't have anything in there. That just means that they're not a full 1, but they're not a full 3. They're missing something. All right, so that is this form in a quick, brief overview on how to fill it out. Familiarize yourself with it. This is going to be what we're going to use moving forward for orientation, and this may be what we use moving forward for system entry. Right now, we're still in a little bit of a trial phase, and we will get some reviews from the individuals that have used this to get your input on what we should do with this moving forward. Once again, there was the ideas that were tossed out of asking when can we do a formal FTEP program, and can we use something that we can send out to everybody so we can see what they've done and where they're at. Now, what you do not see on here is that one form that we've had that was where the preceptor signed off that they did the Monday 12 lead transmission. They went over proper radio etiquette. They went over all that small detailed information. It is your responsibility to show them how to do all this stuff and to show them our equipment. Whenever I would have an orientee with me, my mindset was I'm going to train this individual to be my partner. And you should have that thought for everybody that rides with you. Train them and prepare them to get them ready to be your partner so that you can work with them, or train them and prepare them to respond to you on an ambulance to treat and take care of you and transport you to the hospital. This should be a successful program. This will be a great tool to add into the toolbox to help everybody be successful in this system and to be 100% objective and to give us true information of how somebody is transitioning into this agency, and to really kind of weed out all of that subjective information. It's no longer, yeah, they're good, they're ready to go. It's now, yeah, they're good and ready to go, and this is the criteria, and this is where I can prove and show you that they meet the standard of being a successful provider in this system. Questions, comments, concerns, please shoot those over to any one of us in the training section, and we'll be more than happy to assist you with any questions, comments, or concerns you have regarding this spreadsheet.